Warriors, episode 445. Woo. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by viable human Chris Saturn.
Hello.
Hi, Saturn. I know that it's just a thing we've been doing for a long time, but every now and then the astonishingly high number of the episodes gets to me.
It's a lot.
445 times we have done this.
We are less than 80 weeks away from our 10-year mark.
And 150 of them are pretty good.
Almost.
You know? I'm just...
At least 70-ish.
Yeah, minimum. Definitely 50, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's at least 2 or 3.
Sometimes I think about it and I'm like, I think the podcast is the most successful and dedicated thing I've ever done in my entire life. And I don't know if that's like good or bad.
What about your marriage?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess if you're talking relationships too, I have a wife and a kid.
Yeah.
But we're in episode 445, and I think that's a pretty good accomplishment too.
Your kid isn't 445 years old yet.
Was that? Yeah, we weren't doing the show when I got married, huh?
That's true.
The show is definitely, it's older than my kid.
That is true. Barely.
She's 8.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, it was
anyway,
a few months into us doing the show that your kid was born.
Yeah. Yeah. It felt like it was way into the show, but it was like episode 50 or 60 or something.
Was it that late? Was it a year in?
I think so.
Huh,
I'm pretty
dang.
sure. I'm pretty sure it was like a little ways in. Because I remember when Andrew came in and we did that like kind of makeup episode that didn't really have a topic. It was like, it felt weird. Like we had enough of an established format at that time that it felt strange to be like not doing a format.
Right.
Because for people that don't know, as shocking as it may seem, given the way the shows actually go, we have like 4 or 5 pages of notes for every episode.
Kinda, yeah.
Like we have, relatively extensive notes on some episodes.
Episode 20 is our post-baby grab bag. So
was it 20? That feels so early.
Yeah, because that would have been recorded somewhere around the beginning of December of 2015. So yeah, that maths.
So that means my wife was pregnant when we started doing the show.
Yeah. Because
my wife was pregnant with my kid, and I was like, you know what's a good idea?
Starting multiple podcasts in a network.
This is a great idea.
Yeah, it was July 13th of 2015 is when we put out our first episode.
Man, time flies.
Right?
We're off on a tangent. Guy's going to be here at the end of this
Yay.
episode, so please hang out for producer Guy to come be on the show.
This is a retro gaming show, so we're allowed to wax nostalgic about just about anything.
Yeah, we're a couple years from us becoming retro, and
That's
then we
true.
can cover our own episodes.
Actually,
talk about them.
5 episodes from now will be episode 450.
Uh-huh.
And I did the math, and the day that episode goes live, our first episode of the show will be exactly as old as the Wii was when we recorded that first episode of the show.
Man.
Yeah.
I was in the Discord today and someone was like, it was a joke, but they were talking about how like Dreamcast isn't retro. And I just wrote the Xbox 360 is 20 years old next year.
Yeah. Dreamcast is 25 this year. Yep.
Guy will be here. Let me tell you about my week, Saturn. I've been playing these games.
Yeah,
they're called massively multiplayer online role-playing games.
Yeah, well, those are big games. You can only play one at a time because they require such a time commitment.
So I'm playing more than 3.
I know.
But I'm saving one for next episode to talk about because it is. I don't want to fully make you go insane or make me sound insane.
Oh, you're going to sound insane either way.
I'm still playing WoW Season of Discovery and Final Fantasy 14. Those are my modern MMOs.
What level did you get to in 14 now?
I think I'm 46, 47.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll get on and fire through a couple levels in like an hour and then like log off, and it's just kind of trucking along.
Fair enough.
I'm kind of dreading that at some point I need to sit down and spend 2.5 hours just teleporting around talking to people to do the main story quest.
Well, on the bright side, I did make you some level 50
gear,
item level 115 gear, so your stats are going to just about double when you equip that.
So I'm it's fun. I'm enjoying 14 as like a, hey, I want to sit down and play for 45 minutes to an hour and feel like I accomplished a thing and got some levels and junk. And it's pretty fun. I'm enjoying playing a healer in that. I really enjoy the targeting system in it.
Yeah, that's nice.
I like because I was nervous because I'm playing a healer in all of these MMOs. I don't know why. I've never played a healer in an MMO, and the idea kind of makes me nervous because that means your team is kind of relying on you for some essential services like keeping them alive.
As someone who is a primary healer in 14, let me tell you the secret about being a healer. It's spite. The secret is that you should hate everyone in your party, and every time someone takes damage, you should give out an exasperated sigh. Exactly. That's the secret.
So it's fun. I really do like the kind of targeting system. I'm really enjoying playing a healer in all of these MMOs because it makes me be aware more of my party and what's going on and how they're engaging.
Yeah.
Just like gameplay wise, that's an interesting angle for these games that I've already played for many, many years. Off and on. And so it's nice because normally I play DPS because then nobody fucking cares what you do.
That's true.
They're like, you are a redundant role. We have a backup of you in every party, so we're not really too worried if you kind of suck or don't know what's happening.
Well, I feel like the better you get at healer, the more you care about DPS. Because then you'll notice every time that they are really dragging ass because suddenly this same dungeon you've done 1,000 times is taking twice as long. Yeah. So you're like, which one of these DPS is not doing their job?
Yeah.
And two, you always notice when they get hit by shit. Because you're focused.
You're like, I have to change targets.
Exactly.
What the fuck is this?
You're focused on the tank all the time, and then suddenly that archer asshole got hit by something. And you're like, ugh, what were you doing?
I like that I can lock my target onto the tank, and then I can use my D-pad to move my target around up and down for party members and left and right for enemies, pop off a single action on them, and then when that action is done, it defaults back to targeting the tank.
It's very nice.
It's very kind of auto MMO mode, but it's fun. It's it's enjoyable.
When you get more comfortable with healing, when you get to the point to where it's all second nature when you will or won't have to heal, eventually you'll change that primary target to one of the enemies and just tab over to heal the tank real quick and then go back to attacking shit.
There have been times like when sometimes it's like we're just going really slow or the tank is really good or has a ton of health and they're just not losing health. So they'll be my secondary target. I'll primary on enemies and then anyway, it's been fun. WoW has been kind of the same. I've sort of I log on to WoW and I do dungeons with people in the Discord. So we have a WoW thread and there's a few people in there that will hop in voice chat and we'll go run a dungeon and I'll log in and I'll heal them for that. Outside of that, I've not been playing a ton of that. It's just kind of more like a fun social activity than something I'm really mainlining,
Nice.
And I also started playing Asheron's Call.
Why?
On the Levi-Strauss server, because I was like, I'm playing these modern MMOs, and they're fun, but they're not quite what I'm looking for. They're not quite exactly that itch that I'm looking to scratch, and this is a problem I have with MMOs. A lot of MMOs are okay games. Very few of them are really amazing games, but they're okay games. But the reason I'm there is not to play an okay game. The reason I'm there is for the massively multiplayer portion. I want to feel like I'm socializing and talking to other people and interacting with other human beings. Otherwise, I'll just go play a game by myself.
But what if they're bad at their job? Then I don't want to talk to them.
Well, then I can tell them, hey, you're bad at your job. Could I maybe help you be better at your job? Let's talk about how you're failing me right now and how you can cease to do so.
I need to make a macro that just says, let me explain how you're failing me right now.
There's Asheron's Call is interesting because it came out around the same time as EverQuest. It came out like 6 months later, and it's just such a different design for the era of MMOs. It's very weird. It's very massive open world with no loading screens was their big selling point. It's kind of fugly. Even for the era is a little fugly.
Because it was what, 02, 03, something like that?
I think it would have been 2000, 2001.
Dang.
I think, it was pretty early, and it was just really weird and different. And it's very different from I've researching MMOs. I've discovered that the what people refer to a lot of modern, like, kind of WoW feeling MMOs as, is they call them tab targeting MMOs.
Okay.
Which I don't know if that's a widespread term or not, but I like it because when I get into an MMO, the first thing I want to do is use WASD to move and target things with the tab button, tab key on my keyboard. That's just how I play all of them because that's how WoW works. And Asheron's Call is weird. It's very weird. It's very clunky. It has really surprisingly solid netcode, and it's totally defunct. I'm playing on a fan server.
Right.
And just kind of goofing off and having a good time. I'm playing a War Mage, I think is the name of the class. I have Life Magic and whatever the Destruction Magic is. It's crazy. There's so many spells. You just find spells on the ground and you can add them to your spell book.
Yeah.
You may not be able to cast them, but your spell list is enormous, like out of the gate. And you just keep finding them. It's one of those games where like every single enemy has like 5 magic items on them. And I was like, this is so bizarre. And then I realized what's happening is there is no bank at all. There's no banking anywhere. And you just have this tiny little baby inventory. And because your inventory, like you can put as many items as you want in it, but you're limited by how much weight you can carry. And so it becomes this thing of like, it's very much a loot filtering game. One of those games where you spend a lot of time just filtering through loot. What do I want to do with it? Do I want to use it? Do I want to save it? Do I want to give it away? Do I want to break it down into materials? And then all of my magic items that I'm wearing, turns out they have their own mana. My robe that imparts a special buff on me has mana that it drains as I'm wearing it. So I have to break down magic items, put it into mana stones, and then use the mana stones to charge up my robe.
Weird.
It's very weird. It's a weird game, and it's fun. It's weird. The server I'm on, there are bigger servers. The one I'm on is pretty chill. People are nice in it, but it's not the most active thing. It's kind of more of a fun thing to experiment with than something that you're really going to mainline, if that makes sense. Yeah. But it's still out there. It's still trucking along, and there's a decent amount of fan servers. And it's a pretty easy game to download and get running. I've got it running on my deck, and I play it with a controller now. So that works about 80% good. And there's a suite of add-ons that really modernize a lot of the UI and a lot of the different elements of it, which is nice. They add things like a functioning map and waypoints, so they like arrows that point you where you need to go and stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Neat.
I'm having fun goofing off with it, just kind of seeing what it was like.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting,
nice.
Like historically. I don't know how awesome the game is. It's fun, but it's real weird. It's a weird game.
I remember not selling a ton of copies of Asheron's Call when I worked at EB. EverQuest was the one everybody wanted. For a brief flash in a pan, people wanted Dark Age Camelot.
Dark Age,
Nobody wanted that Earth Beyond whatever MMO that EA tried to put out.
Oh, I don't even remember that.
What is the name of that one?
I was in middle school when these MMOs were hitting.
Yeah.
WoW was high school for me. WoW was the first time I even looked at MMOs and was like, what are these things? So anything before that, this is like ancient history to me. It's forgotten lore as I'm learning so much. It's very
called
fun.
Earth and Beyond, and I remember it was the first game that I saw that had the online ESRB rating icon instead of the standard ESRB rating icon. They eliminated that icon like a minute into making it because every game was online, so it became useless.
Useless to put it on there.
Yeah, but it had an oval-shaped rating badge instead of a rectangle.
Interesting. Very interesting. It's funny, I was in the Discord and Nick was in there chatting and he was like, I think it's funny that you're enjoying all of these different MMOs in like the healthiest way I've ever seen someone play an MMO. Of just like, yeah, I'll get on and knock out a couple levels and have fun, then turn it off. Like,
weird. You mean you're not going to pour 1,000 hours into it in 6 months?
Well, I have more to say next week. We'll talk more then. Yeah. But that's what I've been playing. What have you been up to, Saturn?
Work. Got a new job, so I've been working a lot. So I've had very little time for games. I did replay Monster Boy, which is still good.
I saw you playing that. Yeah,
it's fun. But for the most part, I've had very little time for the video games. On my first day at work, I so I'm working in a factory where they make things. I'm not
Mhm.
going to go super in depth or anything, but so I'm
You're in a
at
real doll factory?
yeah, it's a real doll factory. We mostly make the sex dolls. So I get there and I'm in orientation, and they hand us these little just little paper bags. And they're like, "This is your starter welcome package." And it's got a
Mhm.
coffee cup in there, and it's got a T-shirt and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And everybody's like looking in there, and they're like, "Wow, cool." And I open mine up, and it's got a Jabra headset, like that you would
Uh-huh.
use for like Zoom calls or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so this is the same kind I got at my last job. I'll probably use this for whatever conferencing system this one has. And then somebody comes by and hands me my laptop, and I'm like, cool, this will go with the headset. And the guy next to me is like, you got a laptop? And is that a headset? And like, I suddenly realize I'm the only person in the room that got a laptop or a headset. And everyone else, I realized over the next hour or two, is fresh out of high school. And they're all like
Yeah.
starting assembly in
So
the factory area.
They're doing like factory
Yeah.
work. Okay.
It's just so happens we're all in the same orientation class.
Right.
So
So it's the big corporate orientation,
Right.
not the your job specific
Exactly.
orientation.
So I'm the one guy in there who's getting hundreds of dollars worth of electronics, and they're like, I guess I got this coffee mug. So like completely destroyed the brief moment of excitement everybody had about their T-shirts and their
Yeah.
coffee mugs. So I felt kind of bad about that. But no,
Yeah.
I've not had much time to play games, unfortunately. Since you were talking about MMOs though, and you're playing healer now, you are almost level 50, so you can unlock the red mage job.
Oh.
And I will briefly explain to you why I think it is super fun.
Okay.
So it's for people who don't play Final Fantasy games, the red mage is usually the balance of white and black magic, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's
Because when you mix those two colors, that's the color you get.
you get red. Exactly. White paint, black paint makes red paint.
Red.
So the red mage in 14, you get your basic arrow and stone and thunder and fire spells.
Mm-hmm.
And you also eventually get a cure spell, and eventually somewhere between level 60 and 70, I believe, you get a raise spell.
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing about the red mage is it has dual cast, like in Final Fantasy V. But the way dual cast works in 14 is as soon as you cast any spell, the next spell, whatever spell it is instant cast.
Mm-hmm.
No charge time, no wait time.
I see.
So if you need to revive somebody, you could let the healer do it, and if they're out of swift cast or whatever, they'll have to sit there and wait for 10 seconds for their spell to cast. Or the red mage can just cast some bullshit spell real quick and instantly raise somebody. So the red mage becomes very useful.
So we're on a low pop server,
Yeah.
and that combined with my rested experience, I'm
Yes.
getting 200% experience most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
And for a game that I'm playing in kind of small bursts, like usually what I do is I log in, I do 2 or 3 main story quests, and then I will go do my 2 duty finders for the day.
Okay.
And that's usually a couple levels. Just doing that for a little bit. And so it's nice. It's expedited enough, and the game is good enough about level syncing when you want to play with friends, which hasn't occurred, but it could.
I did one dungeon with you.
You did do one dungeon with me.
Sastasha.
That's true. And so it's just enough that like it's nice to get to play the MMO without being like, well, what level am I? Am I keeping pace and stuff like this? It's to the point that like, yeah, maybe I would do another job, you know.
Yeah, well, the thing is that 14 gives you a bonus experience for any secondary jobs you get.
Oh God.
So any job that isn't the highest level of your jobs gets bonus experience. So if you did switch to a different job, you might be getting 300 or 400% experience.
I will say playing these other MMOs is making 14 a lot less stressful and a lot easier for me because of how I don't want to sound like I'm being demeaning about the game. I'm sure there are difficult portions of it. I'm
Right.
sure there are ways to play this that is intensely, insanely difficult because all MMOs have that. They've got like the in-game stuff and the
Right.
raids and the hard. It exists.
Oh
right?
yeah.
But it handles so much and automates so much and has such a nice UI
Yes.
that it's nice. It's very nice.
Yeah.
It's a very nice UI.
They don't start introducing hard level stuff in 14 until level 50, and then again at level 60, and again at level 70. So it's everything in between is really just supposed to be teaching you your job.
Yeah.
And then you get to the fun stuff, or the hard stuff anyway, at level 50. And some of it has also been made a little bit easier over the years just to help people get to the higher stuff. But
yeah. Well, that's that classic MMO power creep, right?
Yep.
You want to add new things, so you want people to get to the new things, and then,
the weirdest, well, not weirdest, I completely understand why they made the change, but the change that I was surprised by the most is there's a fight against Titan in Final Fantasy 14.
Mm-hmm.
And the standard fight against Titan you've probably already done at this point.
No. I've fought Ifrit.
Oh, you're way over level for Titan, so if you...
I'm so, because I've realized I'm getting so much XP so fast, and you keep gearing me out every time I hit a milestone.
Yeah.
That I'm like, because it's 200% experience, I'm insanely over leveled for the MSQ where I am.
Okay.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I think Titan is like level 30, 35, 36.
Yeah, I'm way. I'm probably gonna hit 50 next time.
Right. So the Titan fight is on this like floating rock in the middle of nowhere, and he has several moves that will knock you off of the rock, and also several moves that will shrink the size of the rock so that there's less place for you to stand on. And in the original version of the game, if he knocked you off, you just get to sit down there until the whole party wipes and the fight starts over, or until the party wins and it ends. But at some point over the years, they made it to where dead people magically come back onto the platform so that the healers can raise them.
Yeah.
So that's something. Now you're not just left out the whole time.
Yeah.
But it was there was some fun in just hanging out down there with the other dead people.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondering
being
about
a failure.
Yeah, wondering about what it's like to not fail.
And then you get the macro from the healer about how you're disappointing him.
Yeah, that one.
Let's do the news.
All right.
Fan port of Konami's arcade X-Men game demoed for Sega Saturn. Sega Saturn's getting all the good games now.
There's
I
Saturn
feel like
and Genesis both.
And Saturn are getting so many fan. Like, there must have been some breakthrough.
There is
some kind
there
of
is
programming thing.
There's a new game engine for Genesis. I don't know about Saturn. I don't know where these are coming from. I've suddenly blanked on what the name of this game engine is for Genesis that a lot of people are using to make these fan projects, but it's incredibly impressive what they're able to do with it.
Yeah, I'm just glad that it's happening. It's cool. Yeah. I'm excited about it. Previously announced iNeo Flip DS and Flip KB are getting an Indiegogo launch, which is where iNeo basically puts all of their various devices.
Right. So not a surprise, but
no, not a surprise. These are not going to be cheaper in handhelds. These are I believe they're Windows machines. So they've got, I know the keyboard one has a 7840U in it. Like these are chonkers.
Yeah.
There's some pretty good little chonker machines, and it's one of those things where I really wish it was cheaper. I feel like, because it's just DS emulation. It doesn't need a Ryzen 7 in it, right?
I don't know.
But I guess maybe the idea is they're going to do 3DS as well. Right. But we'll see.
Oh, Scorpion Engine is the name of the Genesis dev kit thing.
Raspberry Pi powered solderless GameCube mod chip announced, which is exciting. I fucked up my GameCube trying to mod it.
Yeah.
Even though it's the super easy handholdy mod chips these days, and I had to have someone fix it. So that's good. Yes. I like to see that.
Granted, it's still not super easy to open up a GameCube.
Right. It's not the hardest, but it's
right.
Yeah. It's not super. I would not classify it as easy.
Right.
Hyperkin announces the Mega 95, an emulation-based Nomad clone that plays original Genesis or Mega Drive cartridges. If that's a thing that you want to do on the go and you don't have another way to do it, because Genesis and Mega Drive are extremely emulatable systems on about anything.
But if you want to play your original carts for some reason,
yep, on the go.
Yeah.
It's a very wide device.
Yeah, I will say that it looks like it's probably nicer than the Nomad.
True. Because the Nomad kind of famously sucks.
Yeah, I have a Nomad and it sucks. I don't have the battery pack for it, so mine only weighs like 10 pounds.
Yeah.
As opposed to the one with batteries on it, which weighs like 119 pounds.
It's cool. I like that they're doing it.
Yeah.
It's Hyperkin, and they're kind of the, I'd define them as like the B tier quality company in the emulation space.
Yeah.
They're not putting out the most accurate shit in the world, but if you just want like a cheap thing that does do the thing it says,
exactly,
it's an okay option.
Right.
Steam now allowing games with AI generated content. SAG-AFTRA agrees to contract with company Replica. This is separate news.
Right. Well, it's both AI
it's related.
Sorry.
But to be clear,
meant to put a semicolon in there.
Also, SAG-AFTRA has agreed to a contract with Replica to allow studios to use AI-generated versions of voice actors' voices. So now Steam allows it. We'll probably be seeing that on Steam. Honestly, I don't know how they would have fucking stopped it.
Yeah.
There's no, that'd be like them trying to stop those fucking like dumpy palette swap free asset pack games.
God, I wish they'd stop that too.
There's just too fucking many. What are they supposed to? There's 1,000 a day.
Right.
Like, fuck. I assume I can't tell if Valve is run by like 9 guys in a basement or like a company,
right?
Because they seem to go back and forth every now and then. They give this vibe of it's like, is there like 20 people at your office? Like, what is happening? I'm not a super fan of it, but it's whatever. Valve has issued takedown notices for fan projects, including Portal 64, which did use proprietary Nintendo code.
Right. Well, it used the Nintendo application libraries for the N64.
Right. It's their APIs, which is proprietary.
Right.
So pro tip, if you're going to release a fan project, don't use proprietary stuff.
What?
I know, like, I'm bummed that it got shut down too, and I absolutely don't want to be like, well, I told you so. 'Cause first of all, I didn't. And second of all, that's not what I mean. But just generally, if you're going to do a fan project, avoid proprietary libraries and things that you don't have legal right to be using.
It's a hard line, especially with console fan projects, because in order to get a console fan project off the ground to begin with, you're either going to have to emulate the system or circumvent the DRM in one way or another. And either one of those things could be argued as utilizing proprietary tech.
Yeah, in a more roundabout way than just literally implementing the API. Like it's a split hair for sure, but it's an important one. But it sucks that they're gone.
Right.
The other one was a rebuild of Team Fortress.
Yeah.
That someone was doing, which was literally just the game again.
I think it was Team Fortress S2, something like that.
I forget exactly which one it was, but that one sucks a little more because
Yeah, I don't know much about Team Fortress, but I was really excited about that N64 build of Portal just because it looked incredibly impressive.
Cool idea. Totally. Atari and My Arcade announced the Game Station Portable, and it looks like shit, is what Saturn wrote. I think it looks awesome.
Oh god, it looks like garbage.
It's
Holy
like
shit.
clunky. It's orange and like off-white.
Oh my god.
Oh, it looks
so looks like
70s.
someone pooped it out.
I mean, I'm not gonna buy it because it's Atari,
right.
But it I like it. I think it looks
like it was pooped out of a butt.
It looks just ugly enough for me to love it.
Ugh.
Microsoft sent a message to dev mode users that they may require business documentation for verification purposes. This time I do want to say I told you so. Back when dev mode was the big thing that was kicking around Xbox circles, and everyone was like, yeah, you can run RetroArch and whatever. I believe at the time I was like, hey, enjoy it while it lasts, because this is the kind of thing that does not last forever, and they're going to want to lock your console out eventually. And we're kind of coming up on it.
So far, they're saying that only business users will need to provide a business license, and home hobbyists won't, but it still feels like the writing's on the wall.
I feel like Microsoft has been slowly pulling on the rug of a lot of things for a long time.
Yep.
Because for a little while there, the gaming space was like, Microsoft is pretty kick-ass right now. Like, they're doing, they may not have as many exclusives or whatever, but they're doing good business moves. We like this. And then now the rug keeps sliding out from under everyone.
They felt the least anti-consumer for a while there.
For a little bit.
And they're slowly stepping away from those things. Like I feel like their lawyer has their hand on their collar, like pulling over and over.
Yeah, slowly.
Yeah.
Capcom added Enigma Protector DRM to several of their PC games, including some that were over a decade old. Has since removed it from some games, the intention to reinstate it once the issues are resolved. For people that weren't following this, basically Capcom, after the fact, years after the fact, added DRM to games that, one, broke a lot of them on Steam compatibility or Steam Deck compatibility.
And also just Windows compatibility.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure there was some Windows issues as well.
Yep.
They also broke things like Cheat Engine.
No, they intentionally blocked Cheat Engine.
Oh, was that on purpose?
Yes.
I thought it was on accident.
No, that's part of Enigma Protector. Is it blocks cheating, it blocks trainers, it blocks all of that. So that was the intentional part.
Fuck you, Capcom.
Yep, I'm pretty upset about that one.
Sometimes platforms will, I mean, not console platforms, but sometimes PC platforms like GOG and Steam will issue refunds long after the fact.
Right.
If a company fucks their own game to death after you've bought it.
Right.
So just throwing it out there, you put in the request. They might deny it, but it's worth a shot.
Right. Yeah. Once they reinstate it, I'll definitely consider it.
Speaker company Altec Lansing announces that they're working on new gaming hardware with a company called AI Shark, who is supposedly formerly Game Shark, and also they're releasing it in September alongside, quote, Nintendo's new console.
This is the weirdest fucking news story.
Like, I don't even understand.
So, I'm so confused because Game Shark, if for the youngins who weren't alive in the 90s, was Interact's rebrand of Pro Action Replay, right?
Right.
And then Interact didn't want to pay for Pro Action Replay anymore, and they also were going out of business. So they sold Game Shark to Mad Catz, who created their whole new not Pro Action Replay competing system, just called Game Shark still. And then Mad Catz has almost gone out of business. But this doesn't say that it's Mad Catz. It says it's Game Shark, the company known for the cheat device. But there was no company called Game Shark, but now they're called AI Shark, and I don't know what any of this means.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
But they claim that the new Nintendo console is coming out in September, but then they also walked it back and said, oh, we were just guessing.
Right. And finally, Z Pocket Game Bubble. Looks like an adorable Game Gear that's less shitty.
Yeah, it is. It is
just a fun, cheap emulation device. I didn't see a price on that one. Was there a price?
I did not see a price on the news article that I was looking at.
There's so many of these things coming out, and we'll talk about it soon.
What?
That it's hard to keep up with all of them. Which brings us to our topic at hand, which is emulation handhelds. I may also retroactively rename it to like choosing an emulation device.
Yeah.
Because we have to start by talking about scope. We have collectively very, very limited experience with most of the emulation devices that are out there right now.
I have even less experience.
You have even less than me, and I've used like 4.
Yeah.
And so this episode is more about selection, asking the right questions, how to get the device that you want. And we're just going to kind of cover some broad categories with some examples, but please do your own research. But the idea for this came from the fact that one of the more common questions we get in our Discord is, hey, which emulation device should I buy? I want to get an emulation handheld. Which one should I get?
Right.
And the answer is always, well, please fill out this survey of questions to determine which one would be good for you.
Right.
You know, what are your requirements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I've done is I've kind of broken this down into what questions you should be asking, sort of understanding the state of things. And then I did some categories kind of like what you can broadly expect within certain price categories. Now, none of this is gospel, and every single day that this episode is out, this information is going to get older and less relevant, especially the last portion of it.
Right.
So if you're listening to this 5 years in the future, then go get your fucking PlayStation 9 Orb or whatever. That's going to probably play everything. Right. You're fine. But right now, this is kind of where we are.
And 20 years from now, just log into Stadia.
Right.
And you'll be able to play anything you want.
I guess we should kind of cover our encounters with these devices. I have an Android-based little flippy emulation device that's several years old now. I have both the MiU's Mini regular and Plus, and I've been through 2 generations of Steam Deck. So there's been a couple devices that have come and gone that didn't stay very long. But those are my current crop of emulation device experience. So these are the ones that I have personally used. I will talk about the ones I've personally used, but just be aware that if you're like, no, I really want to know about specifically the whatever specific console, I might not have used it. I don't know. I might not touch on it, and it might be a great console. Like, yeah, maybe the RG280V is awesome. I'm not sure. I've not used one. Should you get that or the RG351P? I don't know. I've not used that either. I just don't know. So Saturn, I know you have a Steam Deck, so you've interacted with that portion of emulation handhelds.
The higher end.
Is that kind of it for you?
That depends. How far back are we going? Because I've got a Retro Duo portable.
Yeah, that's an emulation device. I
played a lot of emulated games on an N-Gage.
Yeah. Okay. You got an Android phone.
I do have a phone, yeah.
So let's dive into kind of asking the right questions. And I think the primary question and the most important question outside of things like form factor, I'm discounting those because I trust that anyone with like eyes and a brain. God, what was I read a phrase on Reddit or something the other day. It was anyone that can fog a mirror. Anyone that can fog a mirror can probably figure out like, hey, this is kind of the size and portability level I want.
Nice.
So I'm not really going to touch on that. But the most important question, and the one we always ask people when they say, hey, what emulation handheld should I get? Or should I get this emulation handheld is, well, which systems do you want to emulate? Like what games are you going to play on it? And it's the same question whenever people say, hey, I want to get a gaming laptop or build a gaming desktop. The question is, what games do you want to play? And, that's going to help determine.
It's the same as how parents used to go into game stores and say, my son wants a video game.
Yeah.
And which...
we have those.
Which of the video games should I get? Oh, which console do you have? What is that?
Yeah.
So...
So, the vast majority of dedicated emulation devices will handle NES, Super NES, Genesis, Game Boy Color with virtually no issue unless they really are just real pieces of crap. You may not be getting fully like BNES cycle accurate emulation, but you will get very playable, usable, full speed emulation across these systems, almost across the board. Even on a lot of cheaper budget kind of garbage devices. You might not like playing on these cheaper budget garbage devices because they're made of junk and the plastic is cheap and the buttons suck, but they will emulate NES, SNES, Genesis, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color just fine. Almost all of it.
The N-Gage will not handle Super NES at full speed. I'm sorry.
N-Gage will not.
Yeah, it's a little much for it.
But if that's what you're after, if you're like, oh, I just want to play Genesis games, man, Genesis is extremely well emulated.
Yeah.
In just about anything is going to play Genesis just fine.
Oh, yeah.
Many devices will handle PlayStation 1 without issue, but N64 is more complicated because N64 is just a more complex and weird machine comparatively. Emulation isn't as far along on it, and it uses a series of different plugins
usually
to make different games work. So each N64 game is going to have its own, like, hey, you want to use, there's one like it's called like the Rice plugin. You want to use Rice for this N64 game and this plugin for this N64 game, and down the line. So just know that PS1 and N64 are not created equal. PS1 will emulate on pretty low-end machines pretty good most of the time. N64 do not. It does not work out that way.
A good rule of thumb is if we could play it on a PC in the 90s, you can probably play it on a handheld now. And we could handle Super NES, Genesis, PlayStation on PC in like 98, 99. But N64 was a challenge.
Yeah. It's also worth pointing out the N64 uses a non-standard control scheme. So just some devices can physically load an N64 game, but the layout makes playing it not very awesome.
Right.
Additionally, if you're playing a PS1 game and it is, like if you're playing Ape Escape on a system with no joysticks.
Right. You're going to have a bad time.
You're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
So again, be aware of the games you want to play. Anything PlayStation 2 or GameCube and forward, you're going to be looking much more closely and spending a bit more money. Because right now, this is kind of the weird barrier that's already blurring at the time of recording is lower-end handhelds are becoming capable of handling PS2 and GameCube in some regards. Dreamcast kind of also falls into this camp.
And I think that's only going to accelerate now that the Raspberry Pi 5 is out.
For sure. So we are seeing lower-end handhelds, and we'll talk about what lower-end even means in a minute, that are able to handle PS2 and GameCube and often Dreamcast. The GameCube is a very well emulated machine. PS2 has had huge strides taken in recent years. In Dreamcast is also pretty well emulated. But you want to look really carefully. There are a lot of systems that are right on that cusp. It's like, they'll run GameCube at 48 FPS.
Yeah, or it'll run some games at 60 FPS and other games at 8.
So it's worth looking. If you're like, hey, I literally just want to play Luigi's Mansion on GameCube, and that's the only GameCube game I care about, that one might run full speed all the way through. It's worth checking.
Yeah.
If you are after Xbox, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, Switch, Wii, or any later consoles than any of those, you're going to be in a totally different category than most of these emulation devices existing.
I would say that most things that can handle GameCube can also handle Wii.
I guess that's true. There is a little bit of a barrier. There's some overlap. So maybe not so much as Xbox 360, and PS3. Xbox in particular, because it's just so, the emulation is just not very great. Far along.
Yeah.
It's something to keep in mind. Sega Saturn as well, I would kind of put into this later category just because emulation on it isn't awesome yet. It's pretty good if you have a good powered machine. And emulation it's this weird graph, right? Where in some cases, if you can just throw more raw power at something, you can get pretty close to acceptable performance, even if it's not the best emulation.
And often it depends, especially when you get into the later consoles, on a game-by-game basis, like you were saying.
Right.
So it's really going to depend on what specifically you're looking to play on each of these consoles. And sometimes, if the game you really want to play happens to have a port on another similar console, it might be worth it to just ignore the one that you were after and go with the other console.
Yeah. Let's talk about emulation. This is just emulation in general, because this is worth knowing, and it's kind of where we're getting into anyway. Again, most 8 and 16-bit systems out there have good working emulators that will handle the vast majority of their respective libraries. But this is not the case for more recent and even a few weird older systems.
Yeah.
So let's talk about just sort of the general status of emulation and where it is. First off, this is a weird one. This one always gets me. Neo Geo Pocket Color needs a surprising amount of horsepower to run, given the relative horsepower of the Neo Geo Pocket.
Strange.
And it is a system that you will sometimes weirdly struggle to run on lower end hardware, because there's something up with NGPC emulation. I don't know what it is. If you haven't been able to tell so far about our vague terms, we're not extreme experts in programming or how emulators work. We just have a lot of experience using them.
Right.
So Neo Geo Pocket Color is one. If you're looking to play that system, and you should because it's great,
Right.
definitely look into it because it's sort of one of the weirder ones.
And if you haven't already invested in dedicated hardware and Neo Geo Pocket Color is the only thing you're after, and you happen to already have a Switch, it might be worth it to just get those collections instead.
Possibly, yeah.
Because
it might be something you look into.
They cover most of the most popular games on Neo Geo Pocket Color, and they run very well on there.
Now, to be clear, if you have a powerful enough system to run Neo Geo Pocket Color, it runs fine.
Right. Absolutely.
But there's stuff where, like, if something can run like a Super Nintendo game or a Game Boy Advance game or a PS1 game, in my head, I feel like it should run Neo Geo Pocket Color.
Well, a lot of that is also that the emulators that we've been using for decades, especially for Super NES and Game Boy Advance, have been cheating. They do not run things correctly, and they do not run things the way that the console does.
Well, accurately. They don't run things accurately.
True. They run things in a way that to the player looks and feels correct. But as far as the actual hardware code is concerned, there's a lot of cheating and fudging numbers involved to get it to run anywhere close to full speed. And because of that, we don't think it should require that impressive of a system to run these things.
Right.
When in reality, maybe it probably should.
I mean, for sure, if you look at something like BNES versus any other non-cycle accurate NES emulator, the power draw overhead is insane.
Yes.
It's many magnitudes more horsepower needed to run cycle accurate emulators. But again,
even on my pretty beefy computer, trying to run BSNES is usually fine until I try to fast forward. Then it completely falls apart.
So it's all worth noting that the state of emulation is rolled up into these devices.
Yes.
And a lot of times, depending on the device, some of them, when they ship with like specialized operating systems, you may or may not be able to easily change the emulators it is using. Now, hopefully, you would know, or maybe through this episode, learn enough to buy devices that just support RetroArch in some capacity.
Yeah, right.
Which I know isn't the greatest software to work with.
Right.
But it is kind of the premier all-in-one suite.
Right.
That updates itself.
Yes. And it's got better support than a lot of the other things out there.
Yeah. Arcade emulators are another weird one where they work pretty good, but arcade emulators also rely on specific ROM sets,
right,
which can get real confusing real fast.
And also because arcade hardware is so specialized, and because different arcade games are going to run on different chipsets and different generations of the same chipset, your arcade emulator may run one game perfectly fine and another game not at all. So you'll want to check the compatibility with the specific arcade games you're after. And also, you don't want to then submit footage of you playing that emulated arcade game as any kind of record or tournament to Twin Galaxies, apparently.
I hope nobody's playing on their Mii Mini Plus trying to get an arcade heist. Just gonna send a picture of their Mii. I got it! It's as legitimate as Billy Mitchell.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly that legitimate.
Sega Saturn, still weird.
Yeah.
Pretty well supported on good hardware, but there are still some intricacies with getting Saturn running. PS2 I put on this list because it has advanced in leaps and bounds lately. Yeah. But it is still a little jank. Depending on what games you want to play on. If you're playing the big megaton heavy hitters, they'll probably work fine. But there are still some oddities for niche titles. If you're playing fucking Mr. Mosquito, I don't know the compatibility level of that, but I would suspect it might be a little weird.
And there was also, unfortunately, that issue recently where the one really impressive Android-based PS2 emulator, Ether SX2, the dev ended up canceling the project and not providing source code just because of harassment and threats from people in the community. So there's some roadblocks depending on which operating system you're after, what emulator is going to be available.
Yeah. PlayStation 3, still very weird. Still lots of unsupported titles. So even if your hardware is capable enough, and really, I'm going to lump all these: PS3, any Xbox, Nintendo Switch, and 3DS.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to emulate any of these on whatever device it is, look into the games you want to emulate first, because they're still a little weird. Compatibility isn't perfect. and you may run into the biggest issue you're going to hit in a lot of these things is slowdown.
Right.
A lot of times a game will work, but you're going to get slowdown even on beefy hardware because the emulation isn't properly utilizing that hardware yet.
Right.
It just takes time. So even if you've got the horsepower, like, yeah, you can run the newest, I don't know, whatever AAA, game that just came out at 60 FPS locked or whatever.
Right.
But you're going through an emulation layer, you're going through a software layer, and it's going to make things wonky depending on how good that is. So that's questions to ask, general states of emulation. Let's talk about devices. And I think kind of the hot category right now is I called it the sub $100 device.
Which apparently that ZPG bubble fits into. I was looking that up a minute ago.
Yeah. Do we know which chip that's running?
I do not.
Does it say?
And in fact, I found conflicting articles as to whether it is running Android or Linux.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, but I assume it is Android at sub 100.
Well, not necessarily.
True.
Because a lot of them are Linux. So this category is the one we definitely get the most questions about.
Yeah.
And one I have experience with by way of the MiU and MiU Mini Plus. Devices in this range are things like the MiU Mini, a huge pile of Ambernic devices like the RG35XX, the RG351P, RG280V, Powkitty devices, pretty much every other clone and knockoff brand floating around the market. A lot of times, the second you see one of these pop up, like there are already MiU Mini clones on the market, which are clones of what is essentially a clone piece of hardware in a way.
It's the Wish.com MiU Mini.
Yeah, it's the double Wish.com. And many of them hit close to the $50 mark, but enough of them are kind of in the $60 to $70 range that I'm just calling this the $100 and under. You got a $100 bill. What can I get? Maybe you want to get a $60 thing with a case you found on Etsy or whatever. Pretty much everything here is going to handle NES, SNES, Genesis, Game Boy Color just fine. Most of it will handle GBA just fine, although be aware that GBAs use a weird screen form factor or weird aspect ratio.
Yeah.
So you might want to look into how squished it's going to be if you are a pixel perfect purist and you're like, no, I need the pixel perfect. Because some screens squish it a little weird to hit that weird aspect ratio. The MiU Mini Plus and the RG35XX and its Plus variant are kind of the two hot devices in this category. Both handle most systems up to PS1. Since they're both popular, they both also have a thriving market of accessories and cases and 3D printed grips and stuff you can get all over Etsy, which is cool. You can also pick up custom buttons, stickers, decals, all manner of retro gaming related stuff. You can deck it out to make it look like a PlayStation or a Sega Genesis or whatever. There's cool things like that. But the most important thing is this, and it's the software. They both offer aftermarket operating systems. The MiU has Onion OS, and the RG35XX has Garlic OS. And both of them fix the majority of issues with the stock OS on both of these devices. And I really honestly would not, and this is only speaking for the MiU because I've not used the RG35XX, but I would not personally recommend the MiU without Onion OS. Because I've seen this pop up in communities of people like, I'm not going to fuck with installing Onion. No. We're not just being like weird nerds about like, well, actually it dropped 2 frames. It is dramatically better. It increases functionality. It makes it better and easier to use. It adds more systems for you to emulate. Absolutely put Onion on there. And it really is a super easy install process. Nice. You literally just, as long as you're on the newest firmware, which if you're not, you need to put a file on your SD card and plug it in and it'll update.
Right.
And then to install Onion OS, you put the Onion files on your SD card and you plug it in. And it says, do you want to do Onion OS? And you say, yes, I do. And then it goes, okay, I'll do that. And then that's it. That's the whole, you've done it. Nice. It's done. If you are after GameCube, PS2, Dreamcast, this is probably not the category you want to be in.
Right.
Some of these devices, again, may be able to run a select few titles, but they're either going to run poorly, be a lot to set up, or not have the controls you need, because a lot of these smaller sub 100 categories don't have things like no analog, or the MiU and the RG35XX have it, but some of them don't have 4 shoulder buttons, or they'll just have 2, or just kind of weird control configurations here. So put some thought into what do the controls look like for the systems that I'm wanting to play. If you maybe just want there's one Dreamcast game you have to have on it. Maybe it'll work. Look into it.
Yeah.
But like the Mii U doesn't support it. You can't do that. Not a thing. I don't know.
But even then, you with especially those consoles, you want to check the controls because
right.
One thing I especially notice on wonky consoles and wonky controllers is a lot of them don't have the click in for the analog sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's not a commonly used feature, especially when we're looking in the PS2 era and before,
it's one you won't realize you have until you need it a month and a half later.
Right.
18 hours into a game. So yeah. Also, there devices like the Retroid Pocket 2S kind of fall into this category price wise. And that's a system that will run select GameCube and PS2 games. But again, it depends on the titles. There's a couple titles that run great. A lot of them don't or can't. And so this is kind of the category where you're like, hey, I want 8 and 16-bit stuff. Maybe some handheld. You're good to go. Yeah. Pick the one that looks good. I recommend the Mii U because of Onion OS. But honestly, you're going to be all right if that's what you're after. Yeah. Let's get into the next category. I'm calling this the $100 to $300 category. I picked these numbers kind of arbitrarily. I think I got it pretty close. But this category opens your options up because it scales all the way up to the cost of a Nintendo Switch. So keep that in mind.
Basic Switch, not an OLED.
Not an OLED. The Aya Odin and Retroid Pocket both exist in this category. Yeah. Depending on the model specifically, because they have a few different models of each of those. And this is an important thing. In this category, they will often sell multiple models. Some of them have more memory. Some of them have slightly more powerful processors. Look into the performance of the different variants as well, because maybe the lower-end model won't run the thing you want, and the higher-end model will. They also do this thing where sometimes the higher-end models come in select colorways. So, yeah, they really kind of push you into the higher-end stuff. Yeah. Both of these systems can handle GameCube, PS2, Dreamcast, some Saturn, but you're going to spend some amount of time tweaking. There may be some titles that don't want to play nice. You're still subject to the emulation status of, the emulators that you're working with. This is also a category that's a little bit less now, but it's very dominated by Android devices, which introduces its own set of oddities.
Yeah.
I personally am not a fan of systems that seem to just be running straight Android without any kind of like gaming front end, because I have
a phone.
I have a phone, but I have an Android gaming device that it's just basically pure Android. And I have a custom ROM on it, and I got the GPD. It's one of the GPDs, one of the earlier GPD systems.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And it's running like Android 6.
Yeah.
So I can't update the Android on it because it's just some knockoff emulation device. They don't provide custom ROMs for it anymore, and I can't get newer emulators for it. So it's just kind of stuck where it is.
Does RetroArch not run on it?
It used to. I've been having issues with it now, and it's having problems updating.
Nice.
Basically, phone OSs are just kind of fussy, especially slightly older versions of them. Like anything before like Android 9 or 10.
I tried to use an iPhone 4 the other day.
Oh boy. How was that?
Bad. It's real bad.
I think we forget,
and it's not necessarily that it was a bad device. It's that the OS is updated, but it's also not supported anymore. So you can't get stuff that's worthwhile for it anymore, but also it runs like shit because it's running a newer OS than it was designed for.
Also, navigating Android, you're basically if you're not using a front end, you're going to be touching it.
Yep.
And you're going to get fingerprints all over your screen, and it's just annoying to me. So just be aware that there are complications when you're running Android on these devices.
Now, if it is a newer version of Android, I want to say it's version 9 and up. The OS has native gamepad support so that you can navigate the entire OS with the gamepad.
Mm-hmm.
If you're running that newer version of Android.
If you're running that newer version, and there will be some gestures and stuff to learn, I'm sure. Right. But a lot of them, what they do is they'll run a custom Android ROM and they'll put their own front end on it.
Right.
And really look into the operating system of these devices because a lot of it, like the MIUI changing the operating system, you just put the files on the card and you plug it in and it goes.
Right.
Android-based devices are not so simple to get different ROMs onto.
Right.
Just kind of by their nature.
Yeah. And also keep in mind, if you're already in the $100 to $300 category, you can sometimes, when it's in stock, get a refurbished Steam Deck in that price.
Exactly. And that kind of brings us into our final category here, which is I'm calling it the $300 plus category because it goes up to, I've seen a $2,500 handheld in this category.
Are you going to get one of those?
No.
Huh?
So this encompasses the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, the Lenovo Legion, the upcoming MSI Claw. This is in addition to
the increasingly dumb named devices.
Yeah. I love that they all just have this one dumb, the Deck, the Ally, the Legion, the Claw. I want them to all have these like fucking 80s wrestler names.
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically anything in this category is pretty much a Windows and or Linux machine.
Yeah, it's a PC of some sort.
It is a laptop built into a handheld.
Right.
Anything in this category is going to handle up to and including Switch emulation.
Right.
Again, be aware, Switch emulation, despite what Reddit will have you believe, is not 100% compatible. It's not perfect. It's not ultra easy to set up, and some games just still don't run awesome on it.
Yeah.
I'm blown away that it's as good as it is for a system that is currently on the market to be emulated this well. That's nuts.
Yeah, that's something we haven't seen in 20 years.
Yeah, normally we have to wait a while. So it's the work that they're doing on Yuzu and whatever the other one is, I forget what it's called, Ryujinx, is great. But again, you're still at the mercy of how good the emulation is. So if you're like, hey, I definitely, absolutely want to buy a Lenovo Legion or an ROG Ally to play Switch games, look into how well the games you want to play emulate on anything, even on your PC. If you have a decent gaming PC, you can load up these same emulators because, again, this is the joke in the Steam Deck community is, yes, you can do that. It's a PC. Right?
Now, I do like the Lenovo one specifically for Switch games just because it comes with Joy-Con.
It's got the little Joy-Cons. I hear the Legion kind of sucks.
Oh, does it?
I've not watched any in-depth reviews, but the vibe is just kind of like, I don't know about this.
I also like that it has the Switch OLED style kickstand. like they're really just making a Switch at this point.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally in particular because these are fully supported by EmuDeck, which is, as much as is really possible, a suite of software that completely streamlines the process of setting up 24 emulators and configuring them on your system, which is a no small task.
Yeah, it runs incredibly well. It is super user-friendly and straightforward if you at least understand how basic computers and operating systems work, and you are familiar enough with emulators to know what a ROM is and how to move one.
Yeah. So the resources I would recommend to people is, because I think there's been this misconception that like, oh, I buy a Steam Deck and it just emulates games. Well, yeah, it does.
But Justin, you just go to the Steam store and download RetroArch, right?
You have to go put the games on it where they're supposed to be with the associated BIOS files if they need those for them to work. And then once you do, yes, it does.
But Justin, RetroArch is just in the Steam store.
It is, but man. So what I would recommend in this category, if you are an enthusiast, then this whole episode has been a waste for you. You already know what you like and what you want.
Right.
You already know how to navigate this. But if you're just like, look, dude, everyone else has fucking things that fit in their backpacks in their pocket that play everything, and I want that. But you don't know where to go. You have it.
It's a phone.
This is true. We've said this a lot of times. But if you're in this category and you're like, hey, I want to emulate the beefiest emulation stuff I can, and I want to play PC games, I want it all, pick a system that is supported by EmuDeck. And I'm phrasing that generally because I think they're working on adding support for more systems. So by the time this comes out, maybe the MSI Claw is supported by EmuDeck. I don't know. But EmuDeck is the software to go for. What you need to be comfortable doing is, one, you need to be generally comfortable with the process of like installing a piece of software on any old PC. Like if you can install like Microsoft Office, you could probably install EmuDeck. You need to know what systems need BIOS files, and the software will tell you, but you also need to have a source for your games and your BIOS files. To emulate a game, you have to go get the game's file, its ROM file.
Right. And just showing up on a forum and saying, hey, where do I download this game, will usually not result in you downloading that game.
That is the tricky part. Yes. So you do. This is kind of the unspoken portion of the internet, which is how do I pirate things?
Yeah.
And no community wants to say that because they're worried.
They don't want to be the one that gets shut down for telling people how to pirate things.
They don't want to get in trubbies.
Yeah. No.
Nintendo.
One thing I will say about EmuDeck, that the big disappointment that I had with it, the biggest disappointment I had with it, is that when I opened the software, it did not have an adorable background of an emu playing a Steam Deck.
That is their one failing. I'll give them that.
I was so upset. I was certain that some talented artist would have drawn that and submitted it to them, and they would have made it their background. But that's not the case. But fortunately, once you can recover from that, it runs really well.
EmuDeck, they're also coming out with I think a Windows version that's just for your Windows PC, because it is such a good all-in-one suite that I'll be using it on my PC 100%.
The thing that I was most impressed by that is going to convince me to put it on my PC is the cloud save support.
Yeah.
Because the idea that my emulators could have cloud saves is so exciting to me.
Absolutely. It's a lot of the reason that I liked my mini consoles for so long, because I'm real bad about not remembering where I was emulating something, misplacing a save or a snapshot file, and just kind of losing that because, I play all over the place, and so that is a very attractive idea. So basically, if you're in this category, as much as the emulators will allow, you'll be able to basically emulate all of it, even on like a cheapo, refurbished, low-end Steam Deck. As long as you can get the storage space for it, it'll emulate it.
Yeah. And if you're just playing Atari and NES games, you don't even need the storage space.
Nope. The trick is going to be setting up the software, because if you're like, hey, I want to emulate a dozen systems, well, that's going to be about 8 pieces of software, because RetroArch will do a lot of them.
Right.
But it's going to run standalone for a PS2, PS3, Switch, 3DS. 3DS is running Citra, so EmuDeck really streamlines a lot of that process, because if you're coming to these handhelds, I think a lot of the allure for people is like, I know I can set it all up on my PC, but then I got to install a bunch of different fucking pieces of software and configure them, and it's a pain. Right. This removes that need.
Yeah. You'll still need to find the BIOS files. You'll still need to find the ROMs or ISOs, but at least the actual software setup is handled.
This category is also the one with the most movement right now. Like even just during research for the show, iNeo Next Lite was just announced, which runs like a bootleg version of SteamOS.
Nice.
So be prepared for anything purchased in this category to kind of age faster than other stuff.
And that's just possibly true for all the categories right now, just because of how hot this topic is.
So just be aware that whatever you buy, make sure it does what you want.
Right. So that you're not waiting for an update.
Right. Don't buy a system on the promise that maybe GameCube support will get there. It maybe won't. And then you just wasted
Don't buy an Analog Duo thinking someday it'll support save states, because apparently it won't.
I want to talk real quick about kind of a disclaimer about buying off of AliExpress, Temu, Wish, whatever. Because a lot of these companies, many of them have their own websites. Like the Retroid has their own website. iNeo has their own website. Miyu has partnered with a specific company to sell directly on a website. Yeah. But some of these devices, especially when they're hot new ones, fresh off the factory, you got to buy them on places like AliExpress because they ship straight from the factories.
Yeah.
And I want to give a guideline, and this is a guideline I've given many times, and people always come back and go, yeah, but this one looks right. It's wrong. If you ever see a listing for one of these devices on AliExpress or wherever that is below retail, then it is a scam, I promise. I know it's only $5 below retail, and there's 50 reviews, and everyone said they got theirs. It is a lie. Go find the official store. If you don't know where the official store is, go ask for a link, because AliExpress is the fucking Wild West. You go search Miyu Mini, there's 1,000 different sellers listing them. And all of them are scams, except for the one official listing, which is always buried. Go to Amber Nick's official AliExpress store and purchase there. Now, granted, a lot of these devices trickle out onto Amazon. Amazon, you have some amount of safety with, right? I've bought some of them. I think 1 or 2 of my Miyus I bought off of Amazon, and they arrived safe and sound. But I think a lot of people log in AliExpress, and they're like, ooh, this one's $10 cheaper. It's a scam. It just is, period. That's what it is. So when you're buying from these places, buy with something that is safe, a credit card with good protection, PayPal, something like that.
Right.
And just go somewhere. There is a Discord called the Retro Game Handhelds Discord that literally has a channel for every single retro game handheld on the market right now. They have like 1,000 channels. Just go in there and be like, hey, can someone link me the official store? Or if you just have specific questions like, hey, does this device, how does GameCube work on this device? Or whatever. That's a great resource. Even if you're just popping in to ask a couple questions, then get out of there, because the place is gigantic.
Yeah.
But please be careful buying off these websites, because there's a lot of scams on them. It is mostly scam.
I still have never once been able to successfully make a purchase on AliExpress.
Oh, they're weird about your credit card.
Yeah, they won't let me use any of my credit cards.
Also, plan on shipping to take about a month. Sometimes it's just a couple weeks, but just don't count on it. If you're getting it for Christmas or something, don't buy it at Thanksgiving. Like, they take a long time to ship because it's coming from the factory, so it is subject to all of those kinds of things.
Right.
I want to talk broad recommendations, just because I think it's worth saying, like, hey, what do we personally recommend? And I think that's obvious, but I think it's worth putting out there. I really, really, really do recommend the Miyu Mini and Miyu Mini Plus. I know some people have had some issues with build quality or hardware issues. I've so far purchased 5 of them and have yet to encounter them. So I could maybe I've just been lucky. It's very possible. But I'm enjoying mine. I've run into no issues on mine. If you want the most kind of seamless, low effort, out of the box emulation of handheld that I've experienced, then the Miyu Mini wins that by a wide margin, thanks to Onion OS. Once you get Onion OS on there, it's fantastic. And since a lot of people seem to want kind of a no-fuss option, this is as close as something like legally gray emulation consoles ordered directly from a factory in China gets.
Right.
It's very seamless.
Nice.
I highly recommend the Miyu Mini. And I had the Steam Deck on here, but then I realized that I don't really recommend the Steam Deck as an emulation device as much as I recommend EmuDeck as a software suite. The deck and the ROG Ally and now Windows do work with EmuDeck, and it does massive amounts of configuring and heavy lifting for you. You do still need to understand some things, again, like BIOS files, Steam controller profiles, how to run a program in Linux. But basic Steam manipulation to get all this running is really all you're after. It will emulate pretty much everything that is emulatable. If that's what you're after, then if it were me and if it were my money, I would want to go for the Steam Deck, because of the companies, they seem to be the one most invested in long-term supporting this device.
Right.
I would be shocked if ROG was really still hardcore pushing the Ally in 3 years.
Yeah. They will have moved on to 3 other models of Ally by then.
Yeah. And so it's just one of those things. So for me, the Miyu Mini and the Steam Deck combo meal has been very good to me.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people love their ROG Ally. A lot of people love their RG35XX devices. They come very highly recommended. They're worth mentioning. But my personal experience is I've enjoyed both of these devices immensely.
And Justin, what does ROG stand for?
It stands for Republic of Gamers.
Yeah, that's the dumbest.
Republic of Gamers.
What is Asus thinking?
Who's the president of that republic? Do we know?
Mr. Asus.
When did we vote? I didn't.
Oh, you didn't vote. You're not a gamer.
Oh. So mean. Saturn, I know this is you know even less about this stuff than I do. Do you have a broad recommendation for people?
I use my Steam Deck plugged into my television. I am the opposite of the handheld guy. I play everything on my TV, so I have very, very little input here. I have mostly, as far as handheld goes, I think I've spent more time playing on my phone lately than on any dedicated handheld. So I have no input here.
So sad. It's funny when you ended up with my old Steam Deck.
Yes.
And when you got it, I meant to tell you that I had those little rubber rings on the stems of the joysticks.
Oh yeah.
Because I was gonna be like, hey, those are there, just so you know, because those joysticks are prone to grinding on the kind of the well.
Oh.
And then I was like, he's never gonna notice them.
Yeah. No.
He's never even gonna know that.
No.
Because like they work fine, but it feels kind of you feel it when you move them. They're very like rubbery and smooth, and you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. And that's what it was. One of them squeaked. One of them, like if you were spinning the joystick, you'd hit a certain spot and it would go. Eek,
I did hear that. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to tell you that. So it's not the joysticks; it's just those things. I bought a cheaper brand before I got the brand I'm on now, and so because grinding sticks into the well of my joystick thing is a consistent problem I have in my life, and I'm so glad I found for people that don't know, they sell these little rubber. They're like silicone rings, and you just put them on the stems of your joysticks, and they don't grind and get that powdery substance.
I don't have that issue as much. I don't know why.
I think, some systems seem more prone to it.
True.
Like the Switch
N64
stem
is real bad for it.
The Switch stem cannot hit the edge the way it's designed or whatever. Yeah. But then other systems like Xbox does it real bad for me. The first generation Steam Deck did it real bad for me. I'm trying to think what else. N64 for sure, but it had basically razor blades down in there with it, so it's to be expected. Anyway, I interrupted you.
Oh no, I've got nothing. I mostly play things on my TV, so I have very little input here.
Saturn's recommendation is don't do any of this.
Yeah, my recommendation is to put something on as large of a television as possible. Yes. And then grab a controller, sit back, and relax.
There you go. Yeah. So that's emulation handhelds that you can buy.
Justin, you forgot to mention the PlayStation Portal.
No, I didn't. I remembered it perfectly.
Yeah.
It just wasn't pertinent because it doesn't do anything. It is useless.
One of the guys at my new office has one, and he had it at the office. He was playing it on his break. And despite the fact that he was connected to our factory internet, which is relatively slow, and his PlayStation 5 was at his home, it looked surprisingly responsive.
That's good. You know, I'm like, we joke about it because it is kind of a dumb device, and
especially
it looks
for its price.
Too. And it's too expensive.
Yes.
But I hear performance is pretty good on it.
Yeah, I was surprised because I have tried streaming my PS5 to my PC wired over the same network, and it runs like shit. So seeing it run that well on a portable miles away from his house was honestly kind of frustrating.
Yeah. That's surprising.
Yeah.
Very surprising. And you know what else is surprising? The fact that we still have a Patreon. Did you know that it's not gone anywhere?
Really?
We didn't delete it or anything off the internet. It exists. It's
why?
It's there. Please go to it. Please give us money in the year 2024. We would like your money, please.
What?
In return, we'll give you Talking Wizards, which is a show.
Well, we won't give it to you. We'll lend it to you.
It will. You gotta give it back. You gotta undownload it. You gotta email us the MP3 back.
You have to get comfortable with not downloading Talking Wizards.
Right. It's it's a streaming service.
Yeah.
No, you can have any of our stuff in MP3, dear and free, to do with what you wish. You can also hear us talk about stuff before and after the shows. Well, not after, before the shows, and get early access to episodes.
Yeah.
That sometimes have things that are cut out for the main show, or maybe not hear the edits that Pablo adds.
Yeah, sometimes you miss out on some gold.
The discussion does come up in the Discord where people are like, oh, well, I'm on the uncut feed. So the uncut feed, like, Pablo still edits it.
Yeah.
But he just does like a pass to make sure it's listenable. Like he runs it through his filters and stuff, and then he kind of spits it out to me, and he puts the themes on it. But then he'll add funny edits to the final release show. So the question we were asking was like, how many people listen twice to hear the Pablo edits. And a surprising amount of people do, but then other people, they're like, nah, I just wait till someone says something funny happened, and then I wait for someone to post the timestamp, and then I scrub to that edit and I listen to it. So, it's something for everyone. Unless you don't like games, I guess then we have nothing for you.
We have nothing for you.
Yeah, so sorry you're
but
here.
Talking Wizards is still kind of for you.
Right. Yeah. Hi, we want to thank these people. They give us money, and we're going to thank them, starting with Robert Carrier.
And Eric Culler.
King Vidiot.
Matthew Davis.
Nicholas Perfect.
Dave Nelson.
Jerry Voss.
STG the Mr. Guy.
Brian Kim.
And Mark Bowler.
Are all the people we want to thank, and we want to thank you, too, for staying after the show to listen to our producer guy come talk to us
why didn't you say that
stuff.
Before all that other stuff?
I don't know. Did it upset you? Are you upset that I moved it?
Yeah, but everybody tunes out before that.
I don't know. We'll see. So those people don't get it then. This is our reward. If you listen this far, the reward is that you get to hear Guy.
If you listen to us enough that you listen through the whole Patreon pledge, your reward is even more content.
Content. Anyway, stay tuned after the ending theme. Thank you for listening. And as always, let us cling together. Hi, welcome to the after party with our producer, Guy. Guy, are you there? Are you on the line?
You never check.
I don't check. I in my head, I'm like, if I check, Pablo will have to edit it. But if we just go right into it, it'll save him a single edit.
While we're doing the thank yous, you could always post in the chat, hey, Guy, are you still there?
That's two things at once, Saturn.
Yeah, we've already established he can barely do the one.
Yeah, I struggle with just the one thing.
Well, you just do it while I'm saying words, because you don't need to listen to me anyway.
What if you say something I need to respond to?
I assure you I won't.
And then I'm in that situation where you can tell someone's been talking to you, but you're not listening, and then you hear an upward inflection, meaning there was a question, and then they're staring at you, and then you're like, That happens to everyone, right? Does that happen to you?
It does.
Are we in your nightmares now? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, you're just like, I don't know what the question was. Hi, Guy.
Hi. I mean, and Justin is on record of not knowing anything about my personal life, despite many conversations on the show about my personal life. So,
who are you again? I don't.
He's the guy who looks like your D&D friend, Guy.
I think. The thing
my hair just goes the other way.
This is what I figured out. It is that. When I remember very little of what I say on the show. I think a lot of it is I just basically talk continuously for 4 solid hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a lot. My brain is too little.
And then when you're done, you start recording the show.
Yeah, my brain is too little to fit all of this.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't all fit in there, so the old things go out when the new things go through it.
So instead of smooth brain, we'll call you little brain.
Yeah, little brain. It's like Land Before Time, Littlefoot. Little brain. If his siblings had lived, that's what they would call him. What do you got for us this week?
Dude, I only have one note, and I kind of miss Resident Old Bastard.
Oh, so we talked about that on one of our openings. I was re-listening to an episode for some reason, and I was like, I wonder if there's listeners that they're like, oh, I'm an old bastard listener. I like it better when that was the intro. And I guess we now know that there is one at least.
There is one at least.
I feel like I also never say viable human the same. Sometimes I'll say human being.
Yeah.
I just get weird. I think next episode I'm going to say viable person and see if anybody notices. That's my plan.
Hey, it doesn't have to be human to be a person. It's fine.
It's true. Yeah, I guess that's all right.
Or you could just rotate it every episode to some other random thing.
Right, just keep making it weirder. I think Pablo came up with viable human because I think we had the question of like, have we ever stopped to realize that I insult you at the beginning of every episode?
Which no, I never did realize that.
Not only are you old, but you're a bastard.
That's fine.
That bastard.
That's all right.
Yeah.
The world is getting meaner, so it's fine.
Oh, is it? Is that the case?
Yeah, dude, you were in that discussion in Discord, right? Where like somebody referred to children as crotch goblins.
Yeah.
Which is objectively funny and in the right context is fine. Right? Like I don't want to say anything about
we're
that.
just desensitized to the phrases we habitually state,
Right. And like in this context, what were we talking? We were talking about annoying things in general in society.
Yeah.
And this person was talking about people who let their kids run around in restaurants or whatever.
Yeah.
And I agree with that sentiment. And I said it in the conversation too. Like I agree, like people who let their kids run around and just kind of destroy things unsupervised or whatnot, maybe don't do that. But that's not the kid's fault, right?
I think before I had a kid, I would have parsed that whole phrasing completely. I would have not batted an eye. But now that I have a kid and am around kids, it's in my head. I'm like, oh, it's a parenting issue. You know what I mean? Like before I had a kid, I the whole thing would have been different. Would have landed differently for me.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess makes sense, but it's one of those things.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I want to say about that other than, it's the world is kind of mean sometimes.
I think it's our default mode. I think sometimes we default to these idioms that we don't stop and think about for a minute.
That said, if somebody's child is a crotch goblin, I do want them to tell me because I want to see what goblins look like.
Me too. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time interacting with goblins in a fantasy milieu. I would love to see a real life one.
Yeah, I assume it's like a labyrinth kind of thing where they look like Muppets.
I feel like they're probably like pink and fleshy.
Well, they are crotch goblins, so they would need to be pink and fleshy.
God damn.
All right.
To
be clear, we're talking about actual goblins, guy. Real actual goblins.
Yeah, we've stopped talking about children. We're talking about goblins now.
Not talking about kids.
That's fine. It's just we call them crotch goblins, and they have to be pink and fleshy. I don't.
Well, okay, they could be multicolor and fleshy.
That's
you see like some pulsating veins or something would probably make it look kind of.
Oh my god!
I don't know. Definitely hairless though, fully hairless.
Yeah.
You were
if
talking
I were
about
designing a goblin for real life.
For whatever reason, when you said goblin, I was thinking orcs, and it just reminded me of that entire like night we played orcs, and we're just all me like smashy.
Yeah, so Saturn we played a game called Orkborg, which you all play orcs. And you go do orc. It's a tabletop RPG, so you're just orcs, but your missions are like dumb orc things. And we just all defaulted to them being like stupid, like me a orc,
right?
Except for Andrew, who talks like a normal person. And then of course all of our orcs made fun of him, because we thought he sounded stupid.
Oh, look at me, smart. Me use big word.
Yeah.
And so that was what.
Why use big word when little word do trick?
Yeah, when few word do trick.
Yeah, in that game, I had a gun that basically I just fire indiscriminately. It's like a chain gun, like machine gun kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so every time I fired it, I emptied the whole clip, and I got to roll a D3 to see how many rounds get shot each time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just firing it, into people constantly. It was great.
On the note of people being meaner, I've been interacting with a sizable amount of various MMORPG communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I had forgotten how just kind of pure early aughts gamer culture a lot of MMORPG communities are.
Yeah.
And it's, to be clear, I've met a lot of really awesome people. But what I've learned is that the people that are just perpetually hanging out in Discord to complain about things because their character is max level and they've completed everything in the entire game in every configuration of possible character that they can have.
Yep.
First of all, they seem the most unhappy.
Yeah.
But then also just seem so angry.
Well, you have
about
to
something.
You have to remember they've already poured 40,000 hours into that game. They have drained every last drop of fun out of it.
Yeah.
So now they only play it out of spite. If they play it.
I saw one person just kind of talking about this weird paradigm of like the high level MMO players that seem to just hang around and be rude,
Right.
you know? Which again, I've met huge amounts of very nice people.
Mm-hmm.
Lots and lots of in game. All my interactions have in all of these games. They've all been very good. Everyone's been very nice and chill. It's just like the people hanging out in like the forums, you know.
Yes.
It's weird. I forgot what I was trying to say about it, but it's
No, they're bad. I've had the same problem with FF14. The people on Reddit are barely manageable, and the people on the official forums are just straight up assholes.
And then you get in the game and everyone's nice, and you're like, "What?
Very pleasant.
What's happening?"
Like every now and then you'll run into an asshole, but usually everyone else in the group is like, "That guy's an asshole."
One guy goes, "At what point do you just say you've beaten the game and then stop playing it?"
Right.
And I could tell it had never crossed the mind of anyone there. He was just like, "At what point did you just be like, I did it. I completed the game. I'm done. I beat it. I feel good. I did everything there was to do."
Yeah.
And then just go do something else.
Right.
Like, when do you say that?
I think I got there in like the third WoW expansion, I guess Wrath of the Lich King. Right? Like I poured so many hours into Vanilla and Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King. And like at some point I think like we beat Arthas, right? Like the big raid boss at the end of that expansion. Yeah. And I just stopped playing, and I was like, you know what? I'll play again when there's more story. Like,
you're like,
waited for Pandaria to come. Yeah, that's it. I was like, I don't want to do daily quests. I don't want to sit there and log in and grind. I'll wait for new content, and that's good enough. And so, for a few expansions there, that's what I did. I'd wait till the raid would unlock, beat it with my group of people, and then not play again for another year or whatever.
That's what finally happened to me for Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's where Saturn is.
Yeah, well, that's what happened to me back in the day, too, when I was playing, because I'd gotten through the main game, I got through Heavensward, and I was still in the habit of every single week I had to cap everything. And it got to the point where, I think it was around patch 3.2, 3.3, where I realized I'm not enjoying the weekly grind anymore. I'm actively not enjoying it, and I didn't really enjoy most of the story for Heavensward, so why am I still doing this every week? and so I just stepped away from it and was like, maybe I'll try it again some other day. And then I finally did, and I blitzed through the entire thing, got to the end, and I was like, no, I'm done again. All right, I'm caught up. I can walk away.
I was on Reddit talking about one of the MMOs I'm playing, and someone was like, yeah, just wait till you're in the ultra in-game 16-hour raids. Those suck. And I was like, I'm not going to do that.
Right. Yeah, right. 16-hour raid sounds terrible.
That part sounds like it sucks, so I'm just going to not do it. And I'm like, I honestly want to talk to these people. You can't have conversations with them. Usually they just want to yell about oh, this one ability is 2 points too high than it needs to be or whatever. And I'm like, people put 10,000 man hours into the art and music and story of this game, and you're complaining about, I digress. Mm-hmm. But I just want to be like, well, you don't have to do it either.
Right.
Like, you know that, right? Like if you're doing it and you're like, this is fucking awful, just don't do that. And then go back to the stuff you did like and go do that. And if you go back to that and you go, well, I've already done this and I'm done with it, then maybe you just can say you beat it. Maybe you can just say I'm done. I've done enough.
Yeah.
Dude, sort of related to that attitude. I was talking to somebody, I say talking to somebody on Reddit, but I was on Reddit.
Right. Yeah. There was a conversation happening.
And somebody had posted a thing on Ask Reddit that was like, I've recently stopped drinking because I don't enjoy it. But for those who stopped drinking, what are your tips and tricks when you go to office parties? Yeah. And everybody's kind of like, just don't drink. What the fuck are you talking about? And like his thing was like, I've developed a reputation as somebody who can put away a bunch of drinks, and I just don't want to deal with people asking me why I'm not drinking. And my response to that was just tell him, A, fuck off, or B, like, I just don't want to drink. Like, clearly you're like in your early 20s and you care about what people think, right?
Right.
Well, I think there's also this thing of when you've crafted that reputation, I think that's something that people are kind of conditioned to be proud of, right? Yeah. And it's a thing that they like to get to show off to other people of like, I can really put them back. And I really think it feeds into the larger idea of like this kind of toxic drinking and alcohol culture that we sort of perpetuate.
Sort of.
That we extremely perpetuate. Right. But I think it's tricky. And maybe this kind of feeds back into the MMO thing, is a lot of these people are probably just really proud of their accomplishments and the things they've done in the game, and they don't want to let that go. If they stop playing because they've, in air quotes, done it all, or at least enjoyed as much as they have to enjoy, then who are they now?
So
what is their thing to be proud of now?
At my new job, there's I'm still in training, so I'm in the days, and there's 4 other guys that work IT during the days, and they're all in today. And I'm the oldest one apparently. I went from being the youngest guy at my last several jobs to being the old man now. And then there's one guy who's like 2 years younger than me, and everybody else is in their 20s somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the subject of drinking came up, and the guy that's close to my age was like, I don't drink too much. Like, I'll maybe have a beer once a month or so. And like all the younger people are just staring at him like he started speaking another language. And then I jumped in with, I maybe have a drink once or twice a year. And they all just like acted like we were, criminals or something. And it's just that 20-ish mindset of, well, of course you have to drink when you're not at work. And
that's how you have fun.
If I had to be a young person in 2024, I'd probably want to drink too.
That's true. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
A lot tougher than it was when I was there.
That's fair.
What were we talking? We were talking about something millennial the other day. Oh, it's in our D&D game, right? We were like one of the guys, the name was like Captain Millennial or some shit.
No, it was a Star. So we're playing a Star Wars game. I don't know Star Wars lore. Like, I really love the first 3 movies, but then I don't know anything other than literally what's in those.
Yeah.
And there was some guy, and his name was Darth Millennial. And we could not let that one go.
No, there were so many jokes about how like he's just he turned to the dark side.
Housing market.
Yeah, he turned to the dark side because he was disillusioned because he entered the workforce in 2007. He's been through like 3 recessions.
Just never economically recovered.
It's like, fuck this, I'm Sith now.
Yeah. He makes a Sith avocado toast.
Yeah. First of all, avocado toast is fucking delicious. People, I put sardines on mine.
Gross.
It's extra good.
Yeah.
I think we're out of time, Guy. Thanks for being. I don't know why I said I think. It's the show that I do.
You're doing
we're out
it.
of time.
You decide the time limit.
Guy, you're out of time.
Oh,
and I
wow.
will give you no more. This is the amount that you.
This is the amount I paid
out
for.
Of here.
This is the minimum amount you're contractually obligated to give me.
I'm done contractually listening to you.
Guy, thanks for being on the after party and for producing the show and hanging out and stuff.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be not sick.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're back, and we missed you last week, and it'll be good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, well, I know you're gonna say bye, but whatever. No. I was sick for like a week and a half, and it was one of those sicks where I was like in the middle of it, like, I'm never gonna be well again. This is it.
Oh my God.
I'm done.
I'm really bad about those spirals. I'll feel that way like 9 hours into being sick. Like, this is the rest of my life.
I don't remember what being well felt like.
I've started to develop a mild cough tonight, and I'm terrified that I'm about to get sick again.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no. Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.